Breaking news out of Manchester United is that the club have parted ways with sporting director Dan Ashworth after only 5 months. This comes after the club spent 7 months negotiating with Newcastle before ultimately paying £3 million in compensation to secure Ashworth's services as the new sporting director in a bid to revamp and restructure the board and INEOS' new vision. And according to reports, the decision falls at Sir Jim Ratcliffe's feet, who was left less than impressed with both A, the decision to extend Erik ten Hag's contract past last season, and B, subsequently fund him with £200 million in the transfer window, many of those signings coming under severe scrutiny. This left Jim Ratcliffe no choice but to sack Dan Ashworth after last night's result against Nottingham Forest, which left the club in 13th place, 8 points behind the top 4. Now look, I'm not going to be that guy that just bullshit guys here, talks about the intricacies of Dan Ashworth's job, talks about INEOS in specifics, and pretends like I have sources within the club and knows exactly what's happened here. I'm just a fan like all of you guys. I'm from the outside looking in. I'm reading all the same articles as you guys are. I'm getting all the same notifications on Twitter. I'm learning just like you guys are. However, let me tell you guys this. I'm big on optics. I'm big on how things appear, on how things look. From the outside, sure, but still, how they appear. Now, let me talk about this Ashworth decision very, very quickly. Just my 2 cents. For all I know, this is the right decision to make. For all I know, and all we all know, Ashworth has done a lousy job in the 5 months that he's been in charge. And to be honest with you, when I look at some of the things he's being accused of here, I kind of hear it. Me, you guys all know, I was never on board with extending Erik ten Hag past last season. I think last season was a sackable offense. I think finishing in 8th place in the form and the results that in the performances that we put in under him were by no means ones that should have been rewarded with a new contract. And I think that FA Cup win mixed with fan resentment if they had ultimately decided to move away from Ten Hag, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous, mixed with the fact that they interviewed numerous candidates and ultimately couldn't come to a conclusion with any of them, is ultimately the decision why Erik ten Hag remained in the job. But sources today are basically saying that, well, look, Ashworth alongside Jim Brailsford were big advocates for Erik ten Hag and big advocates that he needed more time, more resources, and a chance to operate under a proper footballing structure. Me, as you guys know, I think that's a load of baloney, and I don't think he should have ever been given another day outside of that job. Apparently, Jim Ratcliffe agreed as well too, and many people have been stating that Ratcliffe actually saw Thomas Tuchel as the ideal candidate to replace him. Ultimately, he couldn't get it done as Tuchel just didn't want to take the job at this point in the summer. So if that's a reason to fire him, hey, I kind of hear it. And ultimately, that decision burst into flames within 3 months. Secondly, were the recruitment side of things. A big reason why Ashworth was brought to the club due to his record with Newcastle, Crystal Palace, and Brighton. You look at the recruitment that they made this summer, and from the jump, I've been consistent with 3 of them. I always liked the Mazraoui signing. I think the Euro signing in terms of profile is perfect and what United need to be making more of. But Ugarte, I still remain skeptical about long-term. I think he's actually been decent enough the last few games. But long-term, in terms of United aiming to compete for major titles, do I see Ugarte as a massive piece in Man United's midfield in doing so? I don't. So the decision to buy him for 55 million pounds, it's a puzzling one for me. Xerxes, although he had great success in Bologna, I looked at the decision to bring an inexperienced center forward with no track record of scoring goals consistently, as well as not even being an out-and-out center forward, to compete with Rasmus Højlund, who also is anything but a guaranteed goal scorer. I was skeptical of the decision. De Ligt, I had my doubts as well too. When you look at how all 3 of them have panned out, they haven't been great. And ultimately, those are signings that reflect on Dan Ashworth. So again, that's a 3rd strike right there. A 2nd strike right there. And then thirdly, the most recent news that we're getting is that upon Erik ten Hag's firing, Dan Ashworth was a massive advocate for Gareth Southgate to take over in his place, having worked in some capacity with him at FA level, I believe. And also, he just wasn't a huge advocate for Ruben Amorim, who, as we know, is the new Manchester United manager. So all 3 of those things kind of taken into account. If that's the reason why Jim Ratcliffe has decided to make this decision, I can't really complain about it too much because I low-key agree with all 3 of those points. I think all 3 of them, if they're Ashworth's doing, he's messed up there. But let me say this, right? Like I said, I'm an optics guy. And the optics around INEOS at the moment are not great. Quite frankly, I think these 12 months, or 10 months if you want to be specific, by INEOS have been an absolute disaster. When you look at every single decision that they've made, I think there's a red flag across every single one of them. If you're giving checks for success or X's for failures, right now there's a whole lot more X's than there are checks. Let me read out a few of the statistics, the damning numbers behind INEOS' first 10 months at the club. Firstly, extending Erik ten Hag's contract, sacking him, costing them millions of pounds. That's got to be an X. Appointing Dan Ashworth after negotiating for 7 months, buying him out of his contract for £3 million, giving him a new one before ultimately firing him after 5 months, paying him another severance package, costing them again millions of pounds. That's a red X. Unprecedented ticket price rises without even consulting everyday Manchester United fans. For me, that's a red X. Fourthly, mass redundancies across the board. Personally, that doesn't really impact me. I can see why someone would give it a red X, but ultimately, like I said, I don't know the ins and outs of the club. Maybe these guys were all kind of working day jobs that they just didn't need to be paying that much for. They just weren't doing a great enough job for. There was no need for them. I don't know. I'm not going to give that a red X. But we'll get back to that because it does tie into another point here. And then overseeing, which for me is the most important thing here, overseeing the worst on-field results since the 1980s. 28 league games, 35 points from takeover. Those are the numbers behind INEOS' first 10 months at the football club. Now, the reason I brought up the mass redundancies and the unprecedented ticket price rises is this is for me a red flag for INEOS, right? This has been an ownership and a group that since they've entered the door have almost echoed one term numerous times: cost saving. That's basically what they've continued preaching. We are looking to save costs across the board. Therefore, like I said, there's been mass redundancies from across the club, and ultimately recently the decision to up ticket prices for children and for older people. £66 if you want to go buy a children's ticket to watch Manchester United. Radcliffe's excuse for this in his most recent speaking to, I think it was a fanzine recently, it doesn't sit right with me that Man United's tickets should cost less than Fulham. Well, in theory, on paper, I would agree. But then you look at the table, Man United are below Fulham. So people are paying money to go see a team that's worse than Fulham. So maybe you should have used a different club, man. Maybe Fulham wasn't the right club to use. Because right now, a ticket to go watch Fulham, you're probably getting more value for money than you are watching Man United for that price. I'm just saying. But you look at this decision to save funds there. In theory, again, you can understand maybe. You can wrap your mind, you can convince yourself why that's the right decision, ultimately sporting-wise, right? Bear with me, just play devil's advocate here. But that logic is completely thrown out the door when you're making decisions like, again, extending Erik ten Hag, paying him more money before firing him and having him to basically buy him out of his contract, paying him a severance package 3 months later. That doesn't sound like saving costs to me. Ditto of Dan Ashworth. 7 months of negotiation, buying him out of his Newcastle contract before again firing him 5 months later and paying him a severance package. That doesn't strike me as a club that are saving costs here. And then for me, you look at this big idea that INEOS have. Tearing apart Old Trafford, rebuilding a new stadium. Again, me personally, I would love to stay at Old Trafford. But if the decision is to rebuild the stadium, that's going to cost loads of money, probably taking away money from strengthening the squad, as we've seen in the past with both Arsenal and Spurs, for a team that right now, on the pitch, are massively suffering. And I've said this recently about Liverpool, right? In their decision to almost penny pinch when it comes to the extensions of Salah, Van Dijk, and Trent. And I've said it with them, I'm going to say it now. Sustainability and funds and I don't know, sponsorships and income and ticket prices, shirt sales, that's all great. But as fans, ultimately, our one concern and our one priority is being successful on the football pitch. And we would like our owners to also mimic that sentiment and have their main priority be strengthening on the football pitch. That's why, for me, Liverpool's decision to potentially penny pinch with their 3 best players, potentially at the expense of on-pitch results, is nonsense. And INEOS deciding to cut costs here, while ultimately making extremely financially devastating moves like they have been in the last few months, isn't helping us on the football pitch. And this decision right here, right? Again, whether it's the right one or the wrong one, only time will tell. It's concerning for me. Let me tell you why. As football fans, since INEOS have come in, we have been on board. And I said it when they came in. They have, for me, one of the, not the easiest jobs in terms of the difficulty of rebuilding Man United, but the easiest job in terms of they should have the fans' full support. You are coming in effectively replacing a regime and ownership in the Glazers that universally are hated amongst the fan base. Universally, every single fan that supports Man United has been clamoring for a new ownership to come in, clamoring for the club to be run under someone else. Someone else has come in, and within 10 months, I feel like that goodwill has kind of been gone because of so many of the decisions I just named. But if you have a plan and you're successful on the football pitch, a lot of those things I just named won't really matter. Right? Ultimately, results are what defines the narrative. Don't believe me? Look at Chelsea. Chelsea, for the last 3 years under Clearlake, under Todd Bowley, have been ridiculed by the media, the press, journalists, Fans, pundits, everybody has been taking their pop at Chelsea. And rightfully so. You look at the recruitment in the last 3 years, you look at the controversies that have happened with academy players, you look at the league finishes, you look at all of that stuff, sacking and hiring and sacking managers. They were ridiculed. How many people this season have spoken about Chelsea's squad size? No one. How many people have spoken about Chelsea's fired managers in the last few years? The decision to fire Pochettino? Nobody. How many people have mentioned Conor Gallagher's basically exile from the first team before being ousted from the club, similar to Trevor Chalobah? Nobody. You want to know why? They're winning. They're winning. Results cover everything. On-pitch performances and on-pitch results are all fans ultimately care about. Other stuff matters, but the priority is winning. So if Man United were challenging for the top 4, or they were 5th, or even maybe 6th, I don't think a decision like firing Dan Ashworth would really cause the clamor it has in the mainstream media like it has today. But it's the fact that United are 13th place after a summer where there was so much promise, so much potential, so much promises from the board that we were hiring best in class and that the board was finally united and on the same front and together in decision making. A decision to fire Ashworth like this, for me, basically nullifies all of that. Because think about it. How can you claim that you are trying to hire best in class amongst every single position if you waited 7 months for a guy, bought him out of his contract, fired him after 5 months? Do you do that for someone you believe is best in class? For me, that has shaken my confidence in INEOS' promises. Secondly, how can you claim that the board is all on the same page? You're all together making decisions. You're all having these massive board meetings when the news today from numerous journalists is that, not everyone agreed with Ashworth's decision, or not everyone agreed with the new manager being Ten Hag, or not everyone agreed with Amorim being his replacement, or not everyone agreed with all the recruit. That doesn't sound like, to me, a board that's all on the same page here. It doesn't. Quite simply. So I think often of this line from Batman the Dark Knight, where the Joker is with Two-Face in the hospital. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie. Terrific movie, by the way, right? And the Joker is talking to Two-Face, and he's basically saying, like, nobody panics when things go according to plan, even if the plan is terrifying. Basically, if there's a plan in place, if everybody believes in a plan, it doesn't matter how doomed the plan is to fail, because you believe there's a plan. You believe that you're on the right path, even if the plan is destined to fail. But when one little old mayor dies, then everyone loses their mind. That's like the famous line from there, right? And obviously, it's not as extreme as real life football, right? That's a movie. But if I'm here to almost like make similarities between the two of them, I feel like Ashworth being fired today is like the little old mayor dying and everybody losing their mind now. On one hand, why are you all losing your mind over one sacking? That's one way to look at it. But the other way to look at it is, was there ever a plan to begin with? I look at Ashworth's signings over the summer, right, for example. And we were told at the beginning of INEOS that nowadays recruitment will no longer be made by a manager, it will be made by the board, and that signings will no longer kind of follow a manager's identity, but rather the club's identity, and they will subsequently be able to kind of incorporate themselves in any manager that follows, because every manager that comes in will be a club identity manager, and every signing that gets made will be a club signing identity, right? You bear with me, right? You're following me. So when I see the signings that got made this summer, Xerxes, De Ligt, Mazraoui, Yoro, all 4 of them, right, might have been great for the way Ten Hag wanted to play, or at least they fit more so his style. I'm looking at a lot of them right now, right? And a lot of them, let's see how they kind of pan out. But I'm looking at a lot of them and how they potentially fit into Amorim's style, and I'm less than convinced. How does De Ligt incorporate himself into this back 3 where you need to have recovery pace to defend in transition, you need to have an expansive passing range in you, you need to be able to play higher up the pitch? How does De Ligt fit into that? Off the basis of the first few weeks, I'm less than convinced. I look at Xerxes. What is Xerxes' role in Amorim's 3-4-2-1? Does he have a clear and concise role in there? Or was he more so a signing that would have fitted Ten Hag more? Again, I'm less than convinced. Mazraoui is a brilliant footballer. But is Mazraoui able to fit in Amorim's system more so because he's just a smart, versatile footballer, or because he was signed with the idea that one day United could go play in a back 3? My point here is, look, you can think all 5 of them are great players, but this idea that we were sold in the beginning that every signing United makes now will be a club signing that fits any manager that comes in, that's already proved to be kind of BS, man. I'll be real. Which again leads me back to saying this plan that we were sold of INEOS, I'm not here to say that it's absolutely bullshit here. I'm not here to say that INEOS are frauds, that INEOS have no idea what they're doing. Ultimately, they have hired and brought in people that have worked in the biggest jobs in football. But would I be lying to you if I said that my confidence hasn't been shaken a little off the last 10 months with INEOS. I would be lying to you if I said that. And ultimately, I repeat, I think the goodwill amongst the fan base has kind of been gone, which is crazy to say. They came in, and in my opinion, INEOS could probably do no wrong. They had the fan base eating out of the palm of their hands. Every decision they made, people were saying, INEOS has changed my life. INEOS are making decisions. We finally look like a football club. We finally have structure. They could have ultimately made any decision and fans would have backed it. Now, 10 months later, after all of the things I've just named you, I'm not sure they have that same leeway. I'm not sure they have that same luxury anymore. And one final thing to Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who amongst all of this has kind of been in the dark a little. We haven't heard much from him, but in the last few weeks has been very vocal. He's talked about how he thinks the club is mediocre at the moment, which I don't necessarily disagree with. He's talked about how, I mean, if you're led to believe, he was never big on Erik ten Hag. He didn't really like, Ashworth's decision to stick by him. He's furious about how the summer kind of played out. And people are kind of like saying, yeah, Radcliffe, I completely agree with you. Like, I love how ruthless Radcliffe is being. All of that's true. But here's the difference between us thinking that and Radcliffe thinking that. We're just fans. We're just consumers at the end of the day. Radcliffe is part owner. Radcliffe is the one that has the power to make those decisions. So Radcliffe complaining about all that stuff does no good to me or you. You can make the change. And yes, he's made that change of Ashworth today, but be proactive about it. Don't wait to see what happens with Erik ten Hag. Make that decision there. That way, we're not left in this situation 5 months later. It's like that meme, oh, guys who say they hate Subway. You made the sandwich. This is your board. You've basically recruited all of these people. You're the one who came in and bought part ownership in Manchester United. At the end of the day, you are the face of INEOS. So it's all good and well complaining about all this stuff and not being happy about this. And, oh, Radcliffe is secretly very upset with this. And, oh, he's being ruthless now. Be ruthless 5 months ago. There's no good in, I mean, there might be good, right? Ultimately, it's better late than never. But don't even be late. You're the owner. You're the one who has more power than anybody here. Today, I'm unconvinced. Honestly, my faith in INEOS has been severely shaken today, right? Like I said, I'm just a fan. I'm looking from the outside in. But as I always also said, I'm a big optics guy. And right now, for me, the optics surrounding INEOS are not very, very bright. They're not very, very, very great today. Agree with me or not. Say I'm overreacting or not. I find United fans these days, right? Everything that the club does, you're overreacting. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. Nothing is a big deal anymore for United fans, I feel. Honestly, I see that so much on social media. People are making a bigger deal out of this than it has to be. That when I saw the Garnacho and how the club basically asked City to take Garnacho and Mainu with them to the Ballon d'Or ceremony amongst their 6 candidates. It's not that big of a deal, man. Why do you care? Why do you care? Why do any of us care then? We're fans. We're invested. Today, this honestly shakes my faith a little in INEOS. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. How do you guys feel? Please don't tell me, who cares? Who cares? If you don't care, scroll off the video. Click off it. I won't mind, honestly. You can come back for a different video. But we're here for conversations. And I think today we got a very big one. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you later today. We'll have updates, reviews for the City and Arsenal game if they're not out already. Peace.